about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, I had been podcasting all the way from, I think, 2003, and typically when I first started, I would talk for about an hour. In fact, I did it twice a week for at least an hour. And then I opened the studio, but I had some medical problems. I had to close the studio for a while. So now we have my own studio here at the house. But what I've decided to do is, because I've been off the air for such a long period of time, since the time that I started to now, the number of people who are podcasting seems to be infinite. On every subject or sub-subject or minor subject that you can think of, or even sane subjects, they seem to be on the air. So I've decided that I'd like to come back on studio on a regular basis, maybe once or twice a week, have guests. But when I podcast myself and just rant for a while, I've decided to make them less than 5 minutes, because there's too much out there. I want people to hear my voice, but they're not going to listen to me for an hour. I don't, because I don't do it. Whenever it's an hour, I go to someone else, so I just listen for the first 15 minutes. So I hope to have on at least a weekly basis for 5 minutes, and then have a guest from time to time. So this is it. Today's subject is going to be whether or not people who are running for presidency can run as a socialist. And no one's bringing this subject up. Mainstream media says, and I won't mention any names. I'll just leave all the names out. So-and-so is running for office as a socialist. And then I say to myself, and now what do I, and they say, well, she believes that, there should be better distribution and the wealthy should give more, all this garbage, all this noise, this smoke that they throw out that avoids asking the question, can a socialist run for president? Do they qualify right up from the beginning? Well, if you look at the Constitution, read the Constitution, and I have, and it's been some time since I've read it, I know that everything in that Constitution refers to individual freedom. Individual freedom. That means the government's charge is to protect the freedom of the individual. Socialism is the exact opposite. Socialism is where the government dictates how free you will be. And one way in which they do that is that when you earn money legally and your own sweat and tears and innovations, right? The government is entitled to that money. They don't tell you how much. Today it could be 20%, tomorrow it could be 25%, the next day it could be 50%. And then the government decides how this money will be redistributed for, quote, the good of society. Well, I thought that charities started at home. When I was young, they were closely knitted, neighborhoods. I lived in East Harlem, New York. Yeah, I'm a Harlem kid. I'm a street kid from Harlem. And people took care of one another. There was very little government intrusion. I mean, if you mention socialism, people would think you're nuts. You say, hey, my parents came over from someplace in Europe, for example, and from a socialist regime, and they were starving to death. And they came here because they wanted to be free. My father came here from Italy, from fascist Italy, and he escaped. He came here, and his first job was in a Polish piano factory. He used to complain, and they used to beat him up every day because he had to prove, being Italian, that he could be as good as all the Polish people. Polish piano. They used to polish pianos or finish them off, not build them, but finish them off. And but people came here knowing that there were no guarantees whatsoever, but you had to make your own way. And my father died penniless. You know, he did have a factory at one point where he had 200 people working for him. They sewed ladies' gloves, which went out of business, and you know, women don't wear gloves anymore. And he was a subcontractor for big corporations like Kaiser Roth and whatever. And then business got bad, and he kept it going for as long as he could. And then he retired with meager amount of money, but he did it on his own. He didn't ask for a dime from the government at all at any time. And he went through a tremendously rough times. But so did everyone else. And everyone expected to do that. They came here from other countries wanting not a U.S. government, not a social government. They wanted freedom. They wanted freedom to pursue their dreams the way they saw it, not the way the government dictates it. Now, so let's get back to this female that's running for office. I mean, she's the one that's everyone's talking about. I don't mention any names. But she says, "Oh, I'm a socialist." Oh, and she smiles, and she's a pretty little girl, you know. And he says, "Oh, she's so good. She wants to take the money from the rich." Well, who's to determine what money to take and whether or not the money was legally acquired or illegally acquired? If you want to take it from the rich, let me suggest we start with the people in Washington, all of whom are making salaries well beyond their capabilities, well beyond what their contribution is to society, well beyond anything that anyone else gets, and they get privileges beyond every other level of society or a state institution or private institution. And yet, if you wanted to get money, get it from them. But no, what they will do is they will enrich themselves while becoming a socialist state, taking more money from you, give to the rich. Now, what happens? What happens when you give to the rich? I mean, when the government takes it and they give it to their friends. Well, they give it to their friends who are wealthy, who then finance their campaign for office. So if you wanted to run for office as a result of this socialist system, which is what we have now, folks, all right, the probability, if you're just average Joe Blow with average Joe Blow, income, you can't afford. Maybe you can put in $25,000 for your campaign, whether it be a senator or even a local state senator or U.S. senator or a representative. All right. Well, you can't afford it. You're going to be against a guy who has millions of dollars behind him. Not that he has $1 million in his pocket, but the government has already confiscated millions of dollars from the public, given it to these people, these businesses, or these associated aligned businesses, I don't know how you would call it, who then take part of that money and give it to the people they want in office so they can continue this Ponzi scheme that goes on forever and then absolutely devastates the middle class and even the lower class people, income people in the United States. But here's the question. Why isn't anyone on any channel, any one of them, bringing this up? Now, one of the news broadcasts that I do watch from time to time is RTV, Russia television. You say, oh, it's communism. No, they allow voices such as myself to be on there and to criticize what's going on in the United States. But they will not touch this subject because once they do, then they have to attack their home country, which is Russia. So even they're skewed in the way they think. What we have to do is say why. We have to ask the question constantly. How does this work? Why is this person qualified? Forget about whether or not they're the right height, the right weight, whether Republican, Democrat, whether they have a college education, a PhD. Forget about all that garbage, all that stuff that doesn't mean anything. He says, why does this person qualify to run for office when they're running as a socialist, which is contrary to our Constitution and Bill of Rights, which is the antithesis of what we should not be? How could they be? But not one SOB in the mainstream media brings this up. Not one. So you know that the mainstream media is controlled and is allowed to exist because of their contributions to the government. The government owns everything. The government runs everything, and everything is corrupt. Now, will we get a socialist president? Yeah, there's a possibility. I think it's not a shoo-in. It'd be, things will have to get very, very bad, which I believe that they will. If we have a severe recession in 2020 or 2019, people won't have any money because the government's already sucked it right out of their veins, already, given money to all the companies in the world or countries in the world, devastated our own economy, with all of these things. And Donald Trump is not helping at all. Don't kid yourself. He's not helping at all. So the end result is that we may wind up with a socialist government. And then everything gets redistributed. And then the United States will have to really rewrite the Constitution. I know many school teachers, and I ask them about this, and they say, and those that will talk to me, very few will talk. And they say, we don't really teach that anymore. We don't talk about freedom. We don't talk about individual rights. We don't talk about government abuses. We're told what to teach. And so much of that really is not very meaningful for our children. They admit that. Now, most just cry and get angry and walk away. But those that do speak with heart. And I think it's sad. Well, folks, I just wanted to make this sort of a libertarian few minutes, if you will. I know the Future Freedom Foundation has a libertarian moment, so I won't steal that from my friends there. But I want to thank you very much for listening in. And let me see if I remember how we can close this program. Let's